I watched my sister Maya stuff my grandmother's quilt into a trash bag, her perfectly manicured nails catching on the delicate stitching. "It's just an old blanket," she said, not even looking at me. "You're 26 years old. Grow up." That blanket was the last thing I had from Grandma Rose, the last thing that smelled like her lavender sachets and felt like safety. Maya knew that. She'd always known exactly where to cut deepest. "Maya, please," I whispered, my voice breaking. "It's all I have left of her." She turned then, her eyes cold and assessing. "You have plenty. You have this room, don't you? You have food to eat. You should be grateful Mom and Dad let you stay here at all." She hoisted the bag over her shoulder. "I'm donating this to Goodwill. It's cluttering up the linen closet." I lunged forward, trying to grab the bag, but she shoved me backward. I stumbled, my hip cracking against the doorframe. Pain shot through my side, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest as I watched her walk away with the only piece of my grandmother I had left. That was 3 weeks before I died. I remember the taste of almonds, bitter and wrong, in the birthday cake Maya had insisted on baking for me. A peace offering, she'd called it, her smile as sweet as the frosting. I'd wanted so badly to believe her, to think that maybe, finally, she'd decided to be a real sister to me. The hospital lights were too bright. Mom stood by the door, arms crossed, looking annoyed. "How could you be so careless?" she'd snapped. "Do you know how much this is going to cost us? You probably ate something that went bad, always so dramatic." Dad didn't even come. Maya sat in the chair beside my bed, scrolling through her phone. I tried to tell them, tried to say that something was wrong with the cake, that I'd tasted something bitter, but my tongue was thick and useless in my mouth. The doctors said it was food poisoning. Severe, but treatable. Except it wasn't treatable. Not when Maya came back that night during the graveyard shift, when the nurse had stepped away. Not when she injected something into my IV line with hands that didn't shake at all. "You should have just disappeared when I asked you to," she whispered, leaning close. Her breath smelled like mint gum. "David was going to propose to you, did you know that? David. Who was supposed to be mine. Who I've loved since freshman year of college, but no, you had to come to that one party, had to be there with your sad eyes and your tragic backstory, and suddenly he couldn't see anyone else." I tried to move, to scream, but my body wouldn't respond. The machines around me began to beep, slowly at first, then faster. "Don't worry," Maya said, smoothing my hair back from my forehead like she actually cared. "I'll take good care of him, and Mom and Dad will finally have the daughter they always wanted without you around making everything so heavy all the time." The beeping turned to a long, steady tone. Then there was nothing. And then there was everything. I woke up gasping, my hands flying to my throat, my chest. No IV, no poison, no death. I was in my childhood bedroom, the small one at the end of the hall that Mom had always said was perfectly adequate, even though it was barely bigger than a closet. The morning light was streaming through the thin curtains, and I could hear Mom's voice downstairs, sharp and commanding as always. My phone was buzzing on the nightstand. I grabbed it with shaking hands, staring at the date. March 15th, 2019, 6 years ago. I was 20 years old again. 6 years before Maya would murder me. 6 years before David, before the betrayal, before the bitter taste of almonds on my last birthday. I sat there for 10 minutes, just breathing, just being alive. My hands were younger, smoother. The scar I'd gotten from a car accident when I was 23 was gone. My body felt lighter, less worn down by years of stress and manipulation. Then I heard Maya's laugh float up from downstairs, and rage flooded through me so hot and sharp that I saw stars. She hadn't killed me yet, but she would. In this timeline, she was already planning it, already laying the groundwork. I'd been so blind the first time around. I'd thought the little cruelties were just sibling rivalry. I'd thought her jealousy was normal. I'd made excuses for every calculated wound because I'd wanted so desperately to have a sister who loved me. But I knew better now. I knew exactly who Maya was, and I knew what she was capable of. The door burst open without a knock. Maya stood there in her designer pajamas, a gift from Dad for getting into law school, looking fresh and beautiful and evil. "Mom wants you downstairs." We're having a family meeting. About what? My voice came out steady, strong, not like the broken girl I'd been the first time around. She smirked. You'll see. Come on, don't make us wait. I followed her downstairs, my mind racing. I knew what this meeting was about. The first time around, I hadn't understood the significance. But now, with 6 years of memories, I knew this was the moment everything had started to go wrong. Mom and Dad were sitting at the dining table with papers spread out in front of them. Dad looked uncomfortable. Mom looked triumphant. Sit down, Mom said, not looking at me. I sat. Your grandmother's will has been finalized, Mom continued, her tone brisk and businesslike. As you know, she left her estate to be divided among her grandchildren. My heart started pounding. Grandma Rose had died 2 months ago. I'd been devastated. She'd been the only person in my family who'd actually loved me, who'd made me feel seen and valued. She used to let me stay with her during summer breaks, teaching me to garden and quilt and cook. She'd tell me stories about her own life, about the businesses she'd built from nothing, about the real estate investments she'd made that had grown into a small fortune. The estate is worth approximately $2.8 million, Dad said quietly. Rose left specific instructions. She left it equally between you and Maya, Mom cut in, her voice sharp. 1.4 million each. However, given your age and your instability, we think it's best if the money is put into a trust that we manage for you. The first time around, I'd agreed. I'd been so young, so unsure of myself. I'd trusted them when they said it was for my own good, that they'd help me invest it wisely. I'd signed the papers without even reading them carefully. That trust had been slowly drained over the next 6 years. $100,000 for Maya's law school tuition, another $200,000 for the family business that had never materialized. $50,000 here, $75,000 there, all for investments and opportunities that never benefited me at all. By the time I'd finally asked to see the statements, there had been less than $100,000 left, and Mom had made me feel guilty for even questioning her. No, I said. Everyone stared at me. What do you mean, no? Mom's voice could have cut glass. I mean, no. I'm not putting my inheritance into a trust managed by you. I'm 20 years old. I'm legally an adult. Grandma left that money to me and I'll manage it myself. Maya's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. You can't even manage to keep your room clean. How are you going to manage $1.4 million? Better than you'll manage yours, apparently, since you need Mom and Dad to hold your hand through it. That shut her up. Maya's face flushed red, and I felt a vicious satisfaction bloom in my chest. Don't be ridiculous, Mom snapped. You have no experience with money. You'll waste it on nonsense. At least Maya is getting an education, making something of herself. Then I'll make mistakes and learn from them. It's my money. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Where do I need to sign to receive the disbursement directly? Dad cleared his throat. The executor is handling everything. I can give you his contact information, but, sweetheart, are you sure? Your mother has a lot of financial experience. I'm sure. The look Mom gave me could have melted steel. You're being selfish and stupid. Don't come crying to us when you've blown through everything and have nothing left. I won't, I promised. I walked out of that room with my hands shaking but my spine straight. Behind me, I could hear Maya's furious whispers and Mom's angry responses. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, in both my lives, I'd stood up to them. It felt incredible. The next 3 weeks were a blur of phone calls, meetings with lawyers, and paperwork. The executor of Grandma's estate was a kind, older man named Mr. Chen, who'd been her financial advisor for 30 years. He seemed pleased that I wanted to take an active role in managing my inheritance. Your grandmother talked about you often, he said during one of our meetings. She worried about your family situation. She wanted to make sure you had the resources to build your own life. Tears stung my eyes. She was the only one who ever really cared. She knew that. That's why she set things up the way she did. He slid a folder across the desk. She also left you this. Instructions, if you will. suggestions for how to invest and grow the money. She wanted you to be independent. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a letter in Grandma's distinctive handwriting, along with detailed notes about her investment strategy, her real estate portfolio, and her thoughts on building wealth. It was like having her here with me, guiding me one more time. I spent hours reading and rereading those pages. Grandma had been brilliant. She'd started with almost nothing and built an empire through careful real estate investments, particularly in up-and-coming neighborhoods. She'd bought properties before they became valuable, held them, and sold at exactly the right times. And she'd left me a roadmap to do the same. I knew things she couldn't have known when she wrote this letter. I had 6 years of future knowledge. I knew which neighborhoods were about to explode in value. I knew which tech companies were about to change the world. I knew about market crashes and recoveries and opportunities. This wasn't just a second chance at life. This was a chance to win. Within a month, I'd moved out of my parents' house. Mom had screamed at me for being ungrateful. Dad had looked disappointed. Maya had smiled and told me she hoped I enjoyed being homeless when I ran out of money. I rented a small apartment in a decent neighborhood and threw myself into research. Every free moment was spent studying the real estate market, reviewing property listings, and refining my strategy. I wasn't going to waste this opportunity. I was going to build something so big, so solid, that my family could never touch me again. The first property I bought was a small 2-bedroom house in a neighborhood called Riverside. It was run down, in need of serious repairs, but it was in an area I knew was about to undergo massive development. The first time around, I'd watched from the sidelines as property values in Riverside had tripled within 3 years. Young professionals and families had flooded in, attracted by new restaurants, shops, and a revitalized downtown. I bought the house for $180,000, put another $40,000 into renovations, and rented it out within 2 months. The rental income covered the mortgage and repairs, and I knew that in 3 years I could sell it for close to $500,000. But I didn't stop there. Over the next year, I bought 4 more properties, 2 more houses in Riverside, a duplex in the arts district that I knew was about to become trendy, a commercial space downtown that would be perfect for the coffee shop boom that was coming. I lived cheaply, driving a used car, and eating ramen more nights than not. Every dollar I saved went back into my investments. I took online courses in property management and real estate law. I networked with other landlords and investors. I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. And I watched my net worth grow. At family dinners, which I attended only when absolutely necessary, Mom would make snide comments about my landlord hobby. Maya would laugh and talk about her law school successes, her important internships, her growing social circle. Dad would look at me with vague disappointment, like I was a problem he didn't know how to solve. I smiled and said nothing. Let them think I was wasting my inheritance on a silly real estate fantasy. Let them underestimate me. I'd learned that lesson well, but I was also watching Maya, studying her, remembering. In my first life, I'd met David at a party in April of 2020, about a year from now. We'd fallen in love fast and hard. He'd been everything I'd thought I wanted: kind, successful, attentive. He'd made me feel special in a way no one else ever had. What I hadn't known was that Maya had been dating him first. Briefly, casually, but she'd considered him hers. When he'd broken things off with her to be with me, she'd never forgiven either of us. She'd just hidden it well, playing the supportive sister while secretly plotting. This time, I wasn't going to meet David at that party. This time, I was going to make sure Maya never had a reason to murder me. This time, I was going to destroy her first. It started small. Maya had always been the golden child, the perfect daughter. She was beautiful, smart, ambitious, and utterly ruthless. Mom and Dad adored her. They'd paid for her undergraduate degree, her law school tuition, her apartment. They'd given her everything while making me feel grateful for scraps. But I knew Maya's secrets now. I knew she'd cheated her way through half of law school, paying other students to write her papers. I knew she'd stolen credit for a major research project from a classmate. I knew she'd lied on her law school applications about volunteer work she'd never done. I also knew she was spectacularly bad with money. Despite having access to her full inheritance plus Mom and Dad's support, she was constantly in debt, constantly buying things she couldn't afford to maintain her image of success. I started gathering evidence, carefully, quietly, anonymously. A tip to her law school's ethics board about the plagiarized papers. a friendly email to the classmate she'd stolen from, suggesting they might want to review the authorship of their research. Public records requests for the volunteer organizations she'd claimed to work with. Nothing that could be traced back to me, just seeds planted and watered, waiting to grow. While I waited for those seeds to sprout, I focused on building my empire. By spring of 2020, I owned 8 properties. My portfolio was worth over $2.5 million, and my rental income was enough to live on comfortably while continuing to invest. I'd been right about Riverside. The neighborhood was exploding. Young couples were offering over asking price for houses on my street. The duplex in the Arts District was surrounded by new galleries and trendy restaurants. I felt powerful in a way I never had before. I was building something real, something mine, something my family couldn't take from me. And then came the party where I was supposed to meet David. I didn't go. Instead, I spent that evening having dinner with Mr. Chen, discussing investment strategies and reviewing my portfolio. He'd become something of a mentor to me, impressed by my dedication and business acumen. "Your grandmother would be so proud," he said, raising his glass of wine. "You've more than doubled your inheritance in just over a year. That's remarkable." "I had a good teacher," I said, touching my glass to his. "And good timing." Timing is everything in real estate, but so is courage. A lot of people your age would have spent that money on cars and travel and fun. You've been disciplined. That's rare. I smiled, but inside, I was thinking about Maya, wondering if she was at the party, wondering if she'd meet David without me there to interfere, wondering if it mattered anymore. It didn't, I realized. David had been a symptom, not the disease. Maya's hatred of me was deeper than any man. It was about mom and dad's attention. It was about inheritance. It was about Maya's pathological need to be the only one who mattered. Even without David, Maya would find a reason to hate me. She probably already did. So I needed to make sure she couldn't touch me. The first crack in Maya's perfect facade appeared in July. She was expelled from law school. The ethics investigation had uncovered not just the plagiarized papers, but a whole network of academic dishonesty. Maya had been buying essays and exams from an online service for over 2 years. The evidence was incontrovertible. Her law school career was over, her degree revoked, her future in law destroyed. Mom called me, screaming, accusing me of somehow being responsible. "You're jealous," she shrieked. "You've always been jealous of your sister. You probably sent them those lies." "I've been busy with my properties," I said calmly. "I haven't had time to think about Maya's law school drama. Maybe she should have actually done her own work." "You ungrateful, spiteful little—" I hung up. Dad called next, his voice tired. "Can you please come home? We need to discuss this as a family." "No, thank you. I have a property inspection this afternoon." "Your sister is going through a crisis. She's going through the consequences of her own actions." "That's not a crisis. That's justice." I hung up on him too. Maya sent me a series of increasingly unhinged texts. Accusations, threats, promises that she'd make me pay for ruining her life. I saved every single one. Documentation. Evidence, just in case. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I'd learned that Maya had been using her inheritance to maintain her lifestyle. The designer clothes, the luxury apartment, the expensive car. She'd been burning through money at an astonishing rate. Always confident that she'd have a high-paying lawyer job to replenish her accounts. Now she had no degree and no job prospects, and her money was running out fast. I waited, watched, and bought more property. By the end of 2020, I owned 12 properties, and my portfolio was worth over $4 million. I'd quit my part-time job at a bookstore, which I'd kept mostly to maintain a sense of normalcy, and was managing my properties full-time. I hired a property management company to handle the day-to-day maintenance, freeing me up to focus on acquisitions and strategy. I was 22 years old and financially independent. I was building generational wealth. I was becoming the woman Grandma Rose had always believed I could be, and Maya was falling apart. She'd moved back in with Mom and Dad after losing her apartment. She'd taken a job as a paralegal, a humiliating step down from her lawyer ambitions. She'd had to sell her car, Her social media presence, once full of glamorous photos and humble brags, had gone silent. Mom tried to extract money from me. Your sister needs help, she said during a forced family dinner I'd been guilted into attending. She's made mistakes, but family should support family. Where was that philosophy when I needed help? I asked, cutting into my steak. When I was sleeping in a room the size of a closet and wearing Maya's hand-me-downs? When you told me I should be grateful for the scraps from your table? That was different. You didn't need. I needed parents who loved me. Instead, I got landlords who tolerated me. So, no, Mom, Maya's financial crisis is not my problem. The silence at the table was deafening. Dad wouldn't look at me. Maya's face was twisted with rage. Mom looked like she wanted to stab me with her fork. You've changed, Mom said finally, her voice dripping with disgust. Money has made you cold. No, I said softly. Dying made me cold. Money just gave me the freedom to stop pretending we're a loving family. I left before dessert. The real turning point came in early 2021. Mom and Dad's house, the house I'd grown up in, the house where I'd been made to feel small and unwanted, was in financial trouble. Dad's business had been struggling for years, and they'd been using home equity loans to maintain their lifestyle. They'd hidden it well, but with 6 years of future knowledge and some strategic investigation, I'd uncovered the truth. They were going to lose the house. Foreclosure was imminent, and I was in a position to buy it. The bank was eager to avoid the lengthy foreclosure process. They offered me a deal: buy the house for the amount owed on the mortgage plus fees. It was below market value, but it would save them time and paperwork. I bought it without hesitation. The day I became my parents' landlord was the sweetest day of my second life. I showed up at their door with my lawyer and the deed to the house. Mom answered, her face going white when she saw the papers. What is this? She whispered. This is me saving you from foreclosure, I said pleasantly. Congratulations, you're now renting from me. You can't. We're your parents, and you are going to lose this house in 2 months. I've paid off your mortgage. You're welcome. The rental agreement is very reasonable, $2,000 a month, which is below market rate for a house this size in this neighborhood. Dad appeared in the hallway, his face gray. Sweetheart, please. You don't understand. This is our home. It was your home. Now it's my investment property. And you're welcome to stay as long as you pay rent on time and follow the lease terms. I smiled. I'm being generous. Another landlord might have evicted you and sold the house to a developer. Why are you doing this? Mom's voice broke. She looked older suddenly, fragile in a way I'd never seen her. Because I can. Because you taught me that family is just a word. And security comes from money, not love. Because you chose Maya over me every single day of my life, and now I'm choosing myself. I held out the lease agreement. You have until the end of the month to sign and submit first month's rent and a security deposit. Otherwise, you'll need to find somewhere else to live. Maya came thundering down the stairs. You can't do this. You can't just... I can. I did. And you're welcome to move out anytime you'd like. In fact, I'd prefer it. The lease only covers Mom and Dad. You're technically an unauthorized occupant. I'm generously giving you 60 days to find alternative housing. The look on her face was everything I'd dreamed of. Pure impotent rage. I left them the paperwork and walked back to my car. A new Tesla that I'd purchased outright. No financing. As I drove away, I could see them through the window, gathered in the living room, having what was clearly a heated argument. Let them argue. Let them rage. It changed nothing. I owned them now. The next 2 years were a masterclass in calculated revenge. Mom and Dad signed the lease. They had no choice. Maya moved out, finding a cramped studio apartment that she could barely afford on her paralegal salary. The family that had once looked down on me was now scrambling to maintain a lifestyle they could no longer fund. I, meanwhile, continued to thrive. My property portfolio grew to 23 properties by 2023. I'd diversified into commercial real estate, buying a small office building and a retail space that I'd converted into a trendy food hall. My net worth had climbed to over $8 million. I hired a full staff, a property manager, a maintenance coordinator, an accountant, and a lawyer. I started a real estate investment company, complete with an LLC and a professional website. I gave talks at local real estate investment clubs, sharing strategies and building my reputation. And through it all, I watched my family crumble. Dad's business eventually failed. He had to declare bankruptcy. The shame of it aged him 10 years and 10 months. He took a job as a middle manager at a company where he'd once been courted as a potential executive. The humiliation was written all over his face every time I saw him. Mom's social circle, the country club women she'd spent decades impressing, slowly iced her out once word spread about their financial troubles. She went from hosting charity luncheons to attending them as a guest who couldn't afford to donate. Her identity had been built on status and wealth, and watching it dissolve destroyed something fundamental in her. Maya was the worst off. Her reputation in the legal community was ruined. The best job she could get was as a paralegal at a low-tier personal injury firm, making barely enough to cover her rent and student loans. Her social media accounts, once aspirational and gleaming, now sat unused. The friends who'd surrounded her when she was ascending had vanished when she fell, and every month, like clockwork, my parents sent me rent. On time, in full, because they knew I wouldn't hesitate to evict them if they didn't. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that sometimes I could barely recognize the family that had once made me feel as small. But I still remembered. I remembered every casual cruelty, every dismissive comment, every time they'd chosen Maya over me. I remembered the blanket, Grandma's quilt that Maya had thrown away like trash. And I remembered dying, the taste of almonds, Maya's whispered confession as the machines beeped their final warning. I would never forget. In late 2023, Maya made a desperate play. She tried to contest Grandma's will. 4 years too late, she filed a lawsuit claiming that Grandma hadn't been of sound mind when she'd written her will, that I'd somehow manipulated her, that the distribution had been unfair. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to get money from me, and it failed spectacularly. Mr. Chen testified about his long professional relationship with Grandma, about her sharp mind and clear intentions. I provided the letters Grandma had written to me, documenting her concerns about my family and her desire to give me resources to escape. Medical records showed no cognitive decline. The judge dismissed the case with prejudice and ordered Maya to pay my legal fees. That was when she finally broke. She showed up at my office. I'd rented space in a nice building downtown, screaming and crying. My assistant tried to stop her, but Maya pushed past her and burst into my office like a tornado. "You've destroyed everything," she shrieked. "Everything I worked for, everything I built. You took it all." I looked up from my computer, calm and unmoved. "No, Maya, you destroyed yourself. I just watched. Liar, you reported me to the law school. I've never contacted your law school, but I'm not surprised someone did. You cheated your way through. That kind of thing has a way of catching up with you. You bought Mom and Dad's house out from under them. They were being foreclosed on. I gave them a place to live at below market rate. They should be grateful. You turned them against me." Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. "Mom won't even talk to me anymore. She blames me for everything. Says if I'd just been smarter, more careful, we wouldn't be in this position. Sounds like Mom hasn't changed much. She was always good at blaming the wrong person." Maya stepped closer to my desk, her hands clenched into fists. "I could kill you. Like you killed me before?" The words were out before I could stop them. She froze. "What?" I shouldn't have said it. I knew I shouldn't have. But God, it felt good to finally throw it in her face, even if she didn't understand. "Nothing. Just that your threats are empty, Maya. You have no power here. You have no power anywhere. You're a failed law student with a dead-end job and a history of academic dishonesty. Meanwhile, I own property worth millions of dollars. I'm successful, I'm respected, and there's nothing you can do about it." She stared at me, her face cycling through emotions, rage, grief, desperation. Finally, she seemed to deflate. I hate you, she whispered. I've always hated you. I know, you've made that very clear. Now get out of my office before I call security. She left, and I sat very still for a long time, my hands trembling with adrenaline and vindication. It should have felt better than it did. By 2024, I'd achieved everything I'd set out to do. I was 25 years old with a net worth of over $12 million. I owned 31 properties, including the house my parents lived in and several high-value commercial buildings. I'd been featured in real estate investment magazines. I gave the keynote speeches at conferences. I'd built exactly the kind of empire Grandma Rose would have been proud of. And my family was exactly where they deserved to be. Powerless, humbled, and completely under my control. Maya had stopped trying to fight me. She existed in a kind of gray limbo, going to work, going home, repeat. She'd gained weight and lost her spark. The last time I'd seen her at a forced family holiday, she'd barely spoken to anyone. Mom had become bitter and small, clinging to Dad and blaming everyone but herself for their fall from grace. She'd aged rapidly, stress and anger etching lines deep into her face. Dad was just defeated. He went to work, came home, paid me rent, and tried not to think too hard about how completely his life had shifted. Sometimes I caught him looking at me with something like fear. I should have felt triumphant. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? Total victory, complete revenge. But there were nights when I couldn't sleep, when I lay in my beautiful penthouse apartment, purchased outright, of course, and thought about the girl I'd been in my first life. The one who'd just wanted to be loved. The one who'd been so grateful for scraps of affection that she'd let her family destroy her. That girl was dead. I'd killed her as thoroughly as Maya had. Sometimes I missed her. The final act came in March of 2025, 6 years to the day after I'd woken up in my childhood bedroom with 6 years of memories and a second chance. I'd planned this carefully, meticulously. This was going to be my last move, the final nail in the coffin of my old life. I'd arranged a family meeting at a restaurant, neutral ground. I'd paid for a private dining room, ordered in advance, made sure everything would be perfect. Mom, Dad, and Maya arrived looking nervous and suspicious. Thank you for coming, I said once we were all seated. I wanted to talk to you about the future. If this is about the rent, Mom started, it's not about the rent. Please, just hear me out. They exchanged glances but stayed quiet. I took a breath. 6 years ago, I inherited money from Grandma Rose. You told me I was too young, too stupid, too inexperienced to manage it. You wanted me to put it in a trust that you'd control. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Maya stared at her plate. I said no. And you made me feel like I was making a terrible mistake, like I was going to waste everything Grandma had worked for. We were trying to help, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. No, you weren't. You wanted control. You wanted access to that money for Maya, for yourselves. You thought I'd blow through it, and you were counting on that. You were hoping I'd fail. Silence. But I didn't fail. I built something. I built an empire that Grandma would be proud of, and I did it despite you, not because of you. We know, Dad said quietly. We know you've done well. You've made that very clear. Have I? Because from where I'm sitting, you still don't understand. You still think I'm the villain in this story. You still think I'm being cruel by charging you rent or by not bailing Maya out of her problems. You still think you were the good parents who just wanted what was best for their children. Weren't we? Mom's voice was sharp, defensive. No, you were the parents who played favorites so blatantly that one of your daughters felt invisible. You were the parents who took everything from me, affection, attention, resources, and gave it all to Maya. You made me feel worthless my entire childhood, and then you were surprised when I didn't want to let you control my one chance at independence. Maya finally spoke, her voice rough. So what? You've won? You've destroyed us all. What more do you want? I pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. I want to give you this. Maya opened it suspiciously. Inside were 3 checks and a letter. That's a check for $300,000 each, I said. And a letter explaining that I've transferred the deed to the house back to Mom and Dad. It's yours again, free and clear. No mortgage, no rent, no strings. They stared at me like I'd grown a second head. I don't understand, Dad whispered. I've spent 6 years building wealth and proving a point. I've spent 6 years watching you suffer the consequences of treating me like I was less than, and I've realized something. I don't want to be the person who finds satisfaction in my family's pain. I don't want to spend the rest of my life being angry. Tears were streaming down my face now. I hadn't expected them. Grandma Rose didn't leave me that money so I could hurt you. She left it so I could be free. So I could build a life where I didn't need anything from you. And I've done that. I'm free, I'm successful, I'm independent. Your opinion of me doesn't matter anymore. Your approval doesn't matter. Whether you love me or not doesn't matter. Of course we love you, Mom said. But she was crying too. You're our daughter. Maybe, but you've never made me feel like it. And that's something you have to live with, not me. I stood up. Use the money however you want. Invest it, blow it, I don't care. The house is yours. Maya, I hope you use yours to build something better than what you had before. Mom, Dad, I hope you use yours to finally retire comfortably. I'm done playing this game. Where are you going? Maya asked, her voice small. I'm moving. I bought a property in California, a beautiful house on the coast. I'm expanding my business there, starting fresh. I don't need to stay here anymore. I don't need to prove anything to you anymore. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. For what it's worth, I forgive you, all of you, not because you've earned it or because you've apologized, but because holding on to this anger was killing me just as surely as— I stopped myself. Just as surely as letting you control my life would have killed me. I'm choosing to let it go. Wait, Maya stood up, her chair scraping loudly. I need to tell you something. Her voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For the blanket, for being cruel, for being jealous. I was a monster to you. I know that now. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you're right, I said gently. You were a monster, and you don't deserve my forgiveness, but I'm giving it to you anyway. Because that's what's going to let me move forward. That's what's going to let me finally be happy. I left them there, sitting in that private dining room with their checks and their guilt. I walked out of the restaurant, got into my car, and drove back to my penthouse for the last time. The moving truck was coming tomorrow. All my important belongings were already packed. I was leaving behind this city, this life, this family. I was going somewhere where no one knew my history, where I could just be the successful young entrepreneur I'd worked so hard to become. That night, I stood in my empty living room and thought about both of my lives. The first one, where I died alone and poisoned, murdered by a sister who'd envied me for capturing the attention of a man who hadn't even mattered in the end. The second one, where I'd let rage and hurt drive me to heights I'd never imagined, but where I'd nearly lost myself in the pursuit of revenge. Neither of those women was who I wanted to be going forward. I wanted to be someone new, someone who remembered the lessons but wasn't defined by the trauma, someone who was successful but not cruel, someone who was strong but not hardened. I wanted to be the woman Grandma Rose had believed I could be, not a revenge-driven warrior, but a builder, a creator, someone who made beautiful things and helped others and lived with an open heart. It wasn't going to be easy. 6 years of anger doesn't just evaporate because you want it to, but I was willing to try. My phone buzzed, a text from Maya. Thank you. I don't know why you did that, but thank you. I'm going to do better, I promise. Another text from Mom. We're sorry. We should have said it years ago, but we're sorry. We failed you, we love you, and we're sorry. And finally, Dad. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Your grandmother would be proud too. I hope California is everything you want it to be. I read the messages 3 times, then put my phone down. Maybe they meant it. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they'd change. Maybe they wouldn't. It didn't matter anymore. I'd already changed. I'd already won, not by destroying them, but by building myself. The morning I left, I drove past my parents' house, their house again, now that I'd transferred the deed back. I didn't stop, but I slowed down enough to see Maya's car in the driveway. Through the window, I could see the three of them sitting at the kitchen table, talking. Maybe planning how to use their money wisely this time? Maybe just trying to figure out how to be a family. I hoped they figured it out. I really did. But I had my own life to build now, my own future to create. I drove west toward California and sunshine and ocean views. Toward the fresh start I'd earned twice over, toward whatever came next. The last thing I did before crossing the state line was pull over at a rest stop and take out the one thing I'd kept from my old life. A photo of Grandma Rose and me, taken in her garden the summer before she died. We were both laughing, covered in dirt, happy. "I did it," I whispered to her image. "I built the empire you wanted me to build. I became someone you could be proud of, and now I'm going to become someone I can be proud of too." I tucked the photo into my wallet, got back in my car, and kept driving. Behind me was 6 years of anger, revenge, and validation. Ahead was an entire life of possibility. And somewhere, in between, was the blanket, Grandma's quilt that Maya had thrown away in my first life. In this life, I'd never lost it. It was packed carefully in the back of my car, wrapped in tissue paper, smelling faintly of lavender. I'd brought it with me. Not because I needed it for comfort anymore, but because it was a reminder. I'd taken back everything they'd tried to take from me. My dignity, my power, my future. And unlike in my first life, this time I was the one who got to decide what came next. This time I won. California was beautiful. The house I'd bought sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, all glass walls and modern architecture. It was nothing like Grandma's cozy cottage or the cramped bedroom of my childhood. It was mine, paid for in cash, filled with light and possibility. I spent the first week just breathing, unpacking slowly, walking on the beach, feeling the weight of the past 6 years lift off my shoulders bit by bit. My business continued to thrive. I'd hired an excellent property management team to oversee my holdings back east, and I was building a new portfolio here. California's real estate market was different, more competitive, more expensive, but I had the knowledge and resources to navigate it successfully. I also started doing something I'd never made time for before. I started living. I took surfing lessons. I joined a book club. I volunteered at a literacy center teaching adults to read. I made friends, real friends, not business contacts or networking opportunities, but people who liked me for who I was, not what I owned. I went on dates, mostly bad ones at first, because I'd forgotten how to be vulnerable, how to let people in. But slowly, I learned. I remembered that I was more than my trauma, more than my revenge story, more than my net worth. 3 months after moving to California, I met someone who made me laugh. His name was James. He was a marine biologist, passionate about ocean conservation. He didn't care about my money or my properties. He cared that I was kind to the waitress at the restaurant where we met. He cared that I asked questions about his research and actually listened to the answers. He cared that I showed up as myself, not as the armor-plated version of myself I'd built to survive. We took things slow. I was honest with him about my past. Not all of it, not the rebirth part, but the family trauma, the fight to build myself up from nothing, the work I was still doing to heal. He listened without judgment. He shared his own story of growing up with an alcoholic parent, of learning to set boundaries, of choosing to build a life focused on what he loved rather than what had hurt him. We understood each other in a way I hadn't understood or been understood in either of my lives. By the end of 2025, I was genuinely happy. Not just successful or vindicated, but actually deeply happy. My business was worth over $15 million. I'd expanded into sustainable housing, development, building affordable, eco-friendly apartment complexes. It was meaningful work, the kind that made me feel like I was contributing something positive to the world rather than just accumulating wealth. I talked to my family occasionally. Stiff, careful conversations where we were all painfully polite. Mom was in therapy, working through her own childhood trauma that had led her to favor Maya. Dad had retired and taken up painting. Maya had used her money to get an MBA and started her own consulting business, helping small companies with legal compliance. She was good at it, apparently, making an honest living for the first time in her life. They sent me pictures sometimes, holiday cards, texts asking how I was doing. I responded briefly but kindly. Maybe someday we'd rebuild something. Maybe we wouldn't. I was okay either way. The anger that had driven me for 6 years had finally, blessedly faded. I still remembered everything, both lives, all the pain, but it didn't control me anymore. It was just information, not identity. On the 6-year anniversary of my rebirth, March 15th, 2025, which was also my 26th birthday, James surprised me with a party. Just a small gathering of close friends on the beach at sunset. There was a bonfire, good food, music, laughter. As I stood there watching the sun sink into the Pacific, surrounded by people who loved me for who I actually was, I thought about the two versions of my 26th birthday. In my first life, this was the day Maya poisoned me, the day I died alone in a hospital, betrayed by the sister I'd loved despite everything. In this life, I was celebrating on a beach in California, financially independent, genuinely happy, with a man who looked at me like I was something precious, and friends who'd shown up just to make me smile. The first life had taught me what I didn't want. The second life had taught me what I was capable of. This life, the one I was living now, the one beyond revenge, was teaching me what I actually needed. And what I needed wasn't to destroy the people who'd hurt me. It was to build a life so beautiful, so full, so meaningful, that what they'd done to me became just a small part of my story instead of the whole story. "Make a wish," James said, lighting candles on the cake. I closed my eyes. I didn't wish for more money or more properties or for my family to suffer. I didn't wish to forget the pain or to erase my past. I wished for more moments like this, more sunsets and laughter and genuine connection, more days where I woke up feeling grateful instead of angry, more chances to build beautiful things and help people and live with an open heart. I blew out the candles. Everyone cheered. And somewhere in my car, carefully preserved in tissue paper, Grandma's quilt remained. A reminder of where I'd started, what I'd survived, and who I'd become. I'd taken it back, not just the blanket, but everything, my dignity, my power, my joy, my life. Maya had tried to take it all from me twice, once with cruelty and neglect and once with murder. But I was still here, still standing, still building, and I'd won in the way that mattered most. I'd become someone worth being. Not someone defined by revenge or driven by anger, but someone who'd walked through fire and come out the other side with wisdom, strength, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. The blanket was just a blanket. What I'd really reclaimed was myself. And that, more than any property portfolio or net worth or family revenge, was the real victory. I'd died at 26 in my first life. In my second life, I'd spent 6 years avenging that death. Now, at 26 again, I was finally ready to actually live. The story doesn't end with my family's destruction. It ends with my resurrection. Not from death, but from the prison of pain and anger I'd built around myself. It ends with me, on a beach in California, surrounded by love, choosing joy. It ends with me winning not by making them lose, but by building something they could never take from me. A life that was wholly, beautifully, unshakably mine. That's the real ending. Not revenge, but freedom. And freedom, I'd learned, was worth more than any empire. Though I have to admit, having both was pretty damn sweet.